Hey, what's up, everybody? Jeremy here, and guys, I'm excited for the conversation we're going to have today because, as you guys know, I am very into the motorsports world and racing, and we have a young guy that is doing it, making it happen, and kind of working his way up into the big leagues of racing. His name is Andre LaFond. He is only 20 years old, and he's doing some cool stuff out there. Andre, thanks for hanging out with me today, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So I want to find out first and foremost, like kind of how did you get into this whole world of racing? You know what I mean? Because I feel like every kid will play baseball or soccer or they don't join the local racing team.
Yeah, so I guess ever since I was little, it was always something I was really into, like cars, racing, all of that. I mean, I got yelled at by my mom a few times for taking my tricycle off a ramp going down the driveway. So it all kind of began there. But then my dad being into motorcycles and watching a lot of MotoGP growing up, I saw that. But motorcycles never quite stuck with me. It was always cars. And then eventually my dad took me to an indoor go-karting place, little electric things. They weren't that fast, but they were a lot of fun. And then I got quite competent at it pretty quickly. And I'm like, oh, I like this. And then it all just kind of snowballed from there. So
how does that work then? Like, I guess when you're going to get started, because I'm used to we see F1, we see the Indy Racing League, we see cars like that, or maybe you see a stock car or something, but so I'm used to going to the dirt track, watching quarter midgets, stuff like that. So I guess kind of what's the where do you go to get started, and kind of how do you climb levels? What does that look like? Because I feel like to a lot of us that we're just totally unaware of okay, so I went to this go-kart track, I had fun, now I want to be a driver. What do I do? How'd you kind of accomplish that then?
Yeah, so we spend a little while figuring that out as well.
Okay. Because to me it seems like I don't know where the door is on that. You know what I mean? I go watch racing, we go up to Englishtown, we go to Pocono, we go to all these different tracks,
nice.
But I don't know how would I start racing.
Yeah, actually I started at Englishtown, funnily enough. And so we did some indoor electric karting, and I kind of outgrew that after a year or two.
And is that do you build your own car, buy your own car? Do you join a team and drive for someone? How does that work?
So when we got into outdoor karting, competitive level karting, we did the state championships, and there are a few drivers who run themselves. Mm-hmm. So it's just them. They bring their cart, their tools, and they work on it themselves. But the majority of people run with a team because the team has a truck, they have transport, they have mechanics, and it's cost-wise, it can balance out depending on where you're going, what you're doing.
Okay.
But as far as building your own cart, that's not really feasible because it's there's parts of it, a lot of parts of it I still don't know, but the karting chassis is a bit of a dark art. It flexes, it bends, and that's how it turns, that's how it operates. Mm-hmm. So there's a fair bit of metal work and a lot of chemistry behind it that I don't fully understand.
Totally. Okay, so that was kind of how you get started then with a team. And I know you ended up racing in the UK for a little bit.
Yes.
I guess when did that come in, and I guess what was that experience like? How is it in comparison to what you've done? Because the thing I find interesting, I had Danica Patrick on the show a few years ago,
cool.
And she mentioned she actually got her start by going to the UK and doing some driving there for a little bit, then coming back and kind of going on to the Indy League. So I guess what does that look like?
So after we did 3 years of karting, and then I talked to my dad and said, I really want to have a career in this, so I think it's time we make the switch to cars soon. So and
how old were you at this point?
At that point, I was 18.
Okay.
So we went to, there was an American Formula 1600 team called Team Pelfrey, and we did a winter test with them early 2021, I think late January. And that went really well. Mm-hmm. And then we the seat that they had available for me, the someone else kind of swooped in and got it out from under us before we could get everything in order.
Right.
But it ended up being a bit of a blessing in disguise in some ways, because the team boss, great guy, he recommended me to a team in the UK to go race Formula Ford over there.
Okay.
And me and my dad were like, great, how do we do that? Because in order to race over there, we needed to get an international competition license. We needed to actually get in the car, find somewhere to live over there.
Right.
And fortunately, the team over there helped us out a fair bit with that, with finding what license we needed, got us a place to stay. But then in order to actually get that license, I had to do, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Spec Miata, but it's basically...
I know old guys driving Miatas, but I don't know what Spec Miata is.
So Spec Miata is a pretty big series in the US. They run basically older Mazda Miatas, MX-5s turned into race cars, and it's a really competitive
so this
series.
is like modifieds, like that type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And that's really popular over here. And one of the criteria for me to get my license was to do a couple big races over here that qualified. So long story short, we finally figure out how to do that. We get to the track and the team boss is like, all right, this is your first race weekend in a car, right? Yeah. Have you driven this track before? No. Have you driven this car before? No. Do you know how to drive stick? No.
Wow. So
went around the pits for a couple minutes, rowing it through the gears, and he's like, all right, you're natural. You'll be ready in the morning. I'm like, all right.
That's wild. So you never driven this car before and you're racing it the next day?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. How did that go?
And it was hectic because it was a pretty large field of cars and, not having touched the car.
Yeah.
But I had previous experience in karts, so that kind of carried me to like the mid pack where most of the quote unquote action happens.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to keep as clean as possible and just like, okay, I'm just here to get my license.
Just get the experience.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Andre. I'm curious because I know like when you're looking at like the big open wheel cars, like everything's on the steering wheel. Like, you're shifting, everything's button shifting and stuff like that. How is it in that type of car? Is it like a lever shifter? Is it a wheel shifter? Like, how does that relate? Because that is different to learn when you're learning versus like I'm used to my shifter being next to me and everything else.
Yeah. So the spec Miata was fairly normal, like no buttons on the
so
steering
it's just a
wheel,
normal, my shifter's where it should be, I'm in good shape.
But then the Formula Ford was also a traditional shifter.
Okay.
But a little bit different in that it has a special kind of gearbox where you're still shifting by hand, but you don't need the clutch.
Oh, interesting. So it's like you're power shifting almost. That's interesting.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, if you're on the upshifts, you can flat foot upshift, and it's so much fun.
I can imagine, because you're probably not even getting that, like, how like a gear kind of has that like hesitation before it clicks in.
Yeah.
Like, so you're not even getting that. You're just kind of going right through it.
Yeah, they go straight in.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, then like you say, moving up into a slicks and wings car, like a traditional US F2000 or British F3 car, those are all, everything's on the steering wheel, paddle shifters, some have radio.
So now you're driving what level of car? You're on the Formula Ford, you're above the Formula Ford, like where are you at? So
I'm graduating from Formula Ford this year, and what I'm going to do this year, I can't technically say yet.
Okay. We'll wait for the surprise.
Yeah, but it'll definitely be with slicks and wings and sequential gearbox and all that, which I'm really looking forward to. But as of now, it's not officially announced, so I can't say a whole lot.
So how fast those Formula Ford cars? Like, how fast do those go? Because I think like the when you're looking at like as the cars get bigger, like how how a quarter midget drives is they don't drive that fast, but they're fun to watch them kind of skid around the corners. But like, or you look at like, you know, like a higher level IndyCar, like they're going 220 on a straight on into a corner. So how fast do the cars you're driving now go?
So the Formula Ford, I think it depends on the track.
Okay.
And they're not incredibly powerful cars, but they're really light.
Okay.
Think.
So you're getting more speed because they don't weigh as much.
Yeah. And they're pretty aerodynamic at the end of the day, just because they're so small. Mm-hmm. But I think it's 115 horsepower, and with driver, it's 500 kilos.
Okay.
So top speed was, I don't know, like anywhere from 120 to 140, depending on the track.
That's pretty good. And you're doing road courses or ovals, or kind of a combination of both?
Only road courses. Okay.
So what is that like then, like reacting to that? Do you know what I mean? Because you almost have to like react before it's there. I'm like, yeah. What was like adjusting to that like?
So the thing I had to adjust most to was in karts, everything happens so much faster. Okay. And then moving into a car.
Well, because in karts, you're literally like almost on top of the motor because it's such a small thing.
Yeah, and the
wheelbase is tiny.
Right off the ground, wheelbase is tiny. Everything happens so quickly. They change direction faster. Well, in a car, I had to get used to slowing everything down, getting used to the feel of everything. Mm-hmm. But when you're in the car, it really doesn't feel all that fast because you're kind of just instinctually reacting to little things. Mm-hmm.
What does that feel like being that close to the ground too? Because like that type of a car is a lot lower than like your kind of standard road car.
Oh yeah. So for a bit of context for people who might not know, in the Formula Ford, you have the literal floor of the car. Mm-hmm. And I'm basically sitting on top of that. Yeah. Like the seat is a foam molded seat, and I'm sitting basically directly on top of the floor. And the floor is maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9 inches from the ground.
Oh, that's really high.
Yeah. Well, it's probably not that high. I'm probably off, but they're pretty low.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of that then, like as somebody, you know, trying to improve your craft and continually get better, I guess like what things do you work on a daily basis? Like I'm sure there's things you work on the track, but I'm sure there's also things you work on off the track to get better on the track. Like I know one of the big things now, a lot of the NASCAR guys are doing it, are these like full simulators that actually feel like you're in a car. But I guess like for you, like what are you doing to improve?
So ideally I would be on a simulator a lot as well because those are huge, but most of the nice ones are very expensive and I don't currently have access to one. Yeah. So a lot of the time now I'm rewatching older videos or more recent videos of mine or of other drivers to kind of compare, see what habit, if I have a habit I maybe don't know about and if it's good or bad, just analyze patterns.
What would those be? Like, what would those kind of habits be? Like what would be something you do? Like how deep you go into a turn or something, or like what would that be?
Habits could be, like if you're like where you downshift, how you're hitting the brake pedal, what your throttle application is like. Is it consistent? Is it smooth? Like how are your hands on the wheel? Are you in one continuous motion? Are you kind of going like that? Are you
sawing on the wheel, baby?
Yeah. Yeah. And just a whole bunch of little things. Like like later on in the session, it looks like you're kind of fading across the track and not right up to the edge on the braking zone. Mm-hmm. Trying to correct things like that, things you may not always notice when you're in the car. And then just for what I'm going to drive this year, just watching videos of what all the drivers at the front are doing, trying to learn as much as I can about the different tracks. Mm-hmm. And then just doing a fair bit of training in the gym just to keep sharp and prep for it.
Yeah, I don't think people realize like the physical aspect, especially like, you know, you're wearing the flame retardant suit, so it's like that's hot anyway. and you're basically running a marathon because you have to, in order to be able to keep your body in this peak condition to do that. I'm curious because I know, and I don't know as much about the level of racing you're coming through. The in-car adjustments and things like that happen. Like, are they, changing like sway bars and stuff like that? Do they kind of make it? Are there adjustments like that get made during a race, or is it kind of the car you start with, other than tire changes, is the car you finish with?
So, in Formula 4, the only thing that would change throughout the race is your brake bias.
Okay.
Because you have a little dial, you can change what % of brake pressure is going to the front, to the rear, but that's basically it.
Okay.
Whereas in some series, you have onboard adjustments for the anti-roll bars, a couple other things, brake bias. Some of the more modern cars, like GT cars, they have traction control, ABS, all that, and you can dial that in on the fly through the wheel.
Yeah.
And Indy cars also have a couple unique ones. I think it's called a weight jacker. And it moves weight from the front to the back of the car with a little lever. And yeah, it's the ones I know off the top of my head.
Well, let me ask you this then. Like, how do you keep sharp out there, right? Because at the same time, like, I think part of it is like, being good and being in good shape and being a good driver. But at the same time, like, if you don't have your head in it for a really extended period of time, right? Because you're making these really important decisions, you're making these really precise moves, and you kind of have to almost be on edge for hours. So I guess what is that like?
So in the moment, it's not something you really think about too much, but when you're kind of out of that space, you really feel it. And honestly, something I use a lot to prep for that is mountain biking.
Okay.
Because it's somewhat of a similar mental state. Like, you're self-analyzing as you go, and you're also keeping as mentally sharp as possible while you're a very, I'm not sure if this is the right term, but a cardiovascularly intensive state.
Yeah. Because it seems like mental fatigue would be like a really big thing, right? Because it is. You're making hundreds of decisions in a short period of time. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, it's like some people don't fully realize that, but then it's like you drive regularly on the roads for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you get out of the car and you feel pretty tired. Then on the racetrack, it's that, but tenfold, because you also have the physical aspect. And it's very, how do I put this? You just kind of have to keep going. If you stop and kind of roll back, that's where it gets you.
I'm curious too, because you've been moving pretty quickly at a young age, and that's not something that typically happens unless your last name's like Andretti or Earnhardt or something like that, and you've kind of had the family connections to do that, right? Like, I know Marco Andretti was in the Indy 500 and he was 19, but obviously he had the pathway there. You had to find your pathway. So I guess what's it like, I guess being young but also creating your own pathway?
It's, on one hand, it's very helpful because you're learning for yourself every step of the way. And which, when you get something right, is rewarding, but it's also pretty difficult because every time you're almost starting from scratch, whereas other people have the budget or the path kind of laid out for them. It's just like, okay, we have one brick of that path here. Where do we put it? Yeah. Just piece by piece.
It makes you kind of, I guess, learn to make solutions, which I think is kind of cool. Well, I guess, Andre, for people listening, you've got a lot of big stuff coming up. They can see on the track more and things like that. Like, how can people connect with you? How can people get involved? I know as well, you guys are kind of growing the team and what you're doing. So, how can people connect with you? How can people get involved?
Yeah. I'm fairly active on Instagram. Feel free to send a message. My website's up, though it needs a little bit of an update, unfortunately. And a lot of the races I will be in this year should be live streamed. So Feel free to tune in.
Are you going to be live streaming from the seat? That would be kind of cool.
Ooh.
I don't know if that's against the rules or something, but that'd be cool as hell.
That would be awesome. I'll try and, I could talk to the team about it and see what they say, but that would be really cool. I know a couple people have done that before.
IG live from Andre LaFond's head cam.
Oh, that would be so cool. Yeah, most of the tracks are pretty big tracks. They have trackside cameras, and I think there will be commentary as well, which will be nice.
Awesome. Well, Andre, thanks for hanging out with me today, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.